Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The debate of whether or not Chamisa is a great leader and deserves his renewed popularity rages on. Here is an audio that I received from a number of people, and they've asked me, am I surprised that Chamisa has returned from his sabbatical popular than ever? Let's just listen to the audio.
Dear President Chamisa, you are the main event in Zimbabwe. That much is crystal clear. Twitter spaces night and day. Chamisa this, Chamisa that. You are the main actor. We can say whatever we want, but we must now admit the truth. Whether you agree with his strategies or not, Mr. Chamisa is the only game in town. He went away from politics for more than a year. Those who had long criticized his approach now had every opportunity to do things their way. There was finally a vacuum, a void that could be filled by all manner of leaders, approaches and ideas. We waited on the edge of our seats for the avalanche of political parties, leaders and better ideas that would rush in to take the mantle, and free us from Zanu with their long-held plans and effective methods. But those opposition liberators without verses and prayers were nowhere to be seen. Those who had criticized him as weak and ineffective, and advocated for a more vigorous approach of action and demos, vanished overnight like ghosts, and were nowhere to be seen. Those that said they were CCC of the NDC Congress of 2019, and were now in charge of the party, have been nowhere to be seen. Not a word, not a peep, not a meeting, not a rally. Nothing. We only see them blocking people on social media. That is the extent of their resistance to Zanu. Those that said they would from a government in exile to replace the mantle of popularity, and led the people, dissipated to dust within 2 weeks. Bombastic figures that had taken over the various MDCs, suddenly fell silent and disappeared under rural rocks, instead of taking over the national freedom movement, in the void left by Chamisa. The sabbatical was the best political move in history. A total exposure of all of Zimbabwe's frauds. They have all had more than a year to take over, and implement all the ideas that they had talked about behind people's backs. Why didn't they do it? Explain. Where are the CCC leaders? Why have Welshmen, Wendare, Mapfumer, Core, etc., not been traveling the length and breadth of Zimbabwe these last many months, mobilizing and galvanizing the base, the people of Zimbabwe? And where has Mwanzora been for the last year? Where has Komichi been? Listen, there's only one game in town. Those shoes are impossible to fill. Everybody now knows it. Everybody must now admit it. You don't have his courage. You don't have his charisma. You don't have his eloquence. You don't have his leadership skills. You just have criticisms and jealousies. And when your opportunities came to put action to your words, to lead, you disappeared like mist under the blaze of the mid-morning sun. Hashtag President Chamisa, URL.
Well. A mouthful. The bottom line, however, is that MDC has been on the political stage the last 25 years. They were elected by the people to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Zanu PF rigged the elections, the 2023, the most recent ones, blatantly, and got away with it because MDC, Triple C, failed to implement even one token reform. And by participating in those flawed elections, they only gave Mnangagwa legitimacy. That is at the heart of the argument. So what is the explanation for the popularity, even though he has failed all those things? Well, one has got to go back to Zimbabwe even before independence. One has got to understand that whilst the ancient Greeks, for instance, wanted democracy, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, they also realized that for that government to work, the people must be educated, knowledgeable, and objective. And they set around to make sure that that is achieved. You've got to realize the contrast between the democracy that the ancient Greeks were proposing, which has been adapted and modified, maybe fine-tuned over the years by many other nations, is a total contrast to the autocracy, totalitarian autocracy that Zanu PF were after. Zanu PF, Mugabe and these Zanu PF colleagues wanted a government by a select few, an autocracy. In an autocracy, you do not want the people to be educated, much less to question you. And so Zanu PF's pre-independence rallies, the pungwes, the all-night vigils, were all about brainwashing the people. There was a lot of singing and slogans, and more singing and more slogans. People were never given the chance to ask anything. And as the country crept towards independence, all those other values that people thought they were fighting for, one man, one vote, freedom of expression, free media, they were all thrown out of the window. Those values do not work in an autocracy. And so we have had this pool of Zimbabweans who have really been brainwashed, have never asked any questions. It is not surprising that the opposition, despite coming up with a promise that they will implement the democratic reforms in Zimbabwe to end the Zanu PF dictatorship, what actually happened is that they adopted the same template as Zanu PF. MDC rallies, even to this day, are all about singing, slogans, more singing, and more slogans. The many videos that you see of Chamisa at a rally, it will be more about slogans. And it's never about the substantive policies that the party is proposing. And so it is not surprising that the so-called Chamisa Chete Brigade have followed Chamisa blindly. One of the burning issues since the 2023 elections has been Chamisa's promise that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. CCC was going to win big. He even evoked the name of God, hashtag God is in it.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Well, the truth is, Mnangagwa blatantly rigged those elections. All his promises of plugging the vote rigging loopholes was all a lie. And yet you'll have some individuals like this comment here in one of the social medias, where the guy is insisting that Nelson Chamisa's job was to win the election, which he did. You know it, I know it. Every thinking human on this planet knows it. His strategy worked because he delivered overwhelmingly and delivered an enormous number of MPs in parliament and councillors to municipal government. Parliament actually was in majority. Zanu not cheated there as well. And it goes on and on. Just as the audio we played at the beginning. We are living in a totally different world here. The truth of the matter is, Zanu PF blatantly rigged the elections. And by participating in the flawed elections, all Chamisa has done is give the regime legitimacy. That is the truth. Why we keep on denying it, beggars belief. The reason why, of course, these people are denying that Chamisa lied is because they cannot face the consequences, the follow-up. If you accept that Chamisa lied, which he did, then the follow-up question is, why did he lie? And the truth is, he lied because he wanted to con people to participate in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, knowing fully well that will give Zanu PF legitimacy. But he also knew that Zanu PF was giving away a few gravity seats to those who participate. In other words, he lied about plugging vote rigging loopholes. He knew Zanu PF was rigging. He just wanted people to participate so that he could win those few gravity seats in Parliament, Senate, and in the Council for his cronies. And that's all he cared about. The issue of lying cannot be divorced from what MDC CCC leaders have been doing all along. I've often played this video where, and it had to be, of course, a foreign media, Chamisa was taken to task for lying.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza kuti nawe akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza kuti nawe akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election,
but
$15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Kasangana na Trump akatibvunza kuti nawe akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
Of course he did not. He was just lying to con his followers to participate in the flawed elections, whose end result was to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. The people have failed to understand what is going on here. These are the Chamisa Chete Brigade. They are not different from the hardcore Zanu PF supporters, who too have followed Zanu PF blindly. But let's be clear on that. We have got a pool of electorate who really have failed to be educated, and admittedly the regime, Zanu PF and now CCC, have never really cultivated opportunities for them, for the electorate to be enlightened. When during the GNU, when Morgan Tsvangirai and company could have pushed, I think as the number one priority, they should have pushed for a free media and freedom of expression so that we really start the process of educating our people so that they can play a meaningful role in the governance of the country. That is, if they had the commitment to create a democracy and not to perpetuate the autocracy, which they've done. Guess what? Morgan Tsvangirai and friends never pushed for any free press and freedom of expression during the GNU. The nearest that Morgan Tsvangirai got to that was to pressure Mugabe to tell the Zanu PF controlled public media to stop calling him a puppet, which they duly did for a few weeks. So the popularity of Chamisa, when you look at the sort of people who are following the Chamisa Chete Brigade, is not surprising. These are people who have been brainwashed all their lives. Many of them are in denial, as we can see, that Chamisa lied about plugging vote rigging loopholes. And the worst thing about it is Chamisa is coming back and he's going to con them to participate in the 2028 elections on the basis of yet another idiotic lie that he would win the elections with no reforms. They will believe him just as they believed in 2023 and 2018 before that, and they will participate, give Zanu PF legitimacy, and thus continue the dictatorship. Chamisa's popularity is not an indication that there's going to be any change. As much as the individual in that audio wanted us to believe that it is proof of Chamisa's enduring leadership qualities, that is just another lie. Chamisa and company failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, where were the leadership qualities then? That has not changed. Do I expect anybody else to have taken over during Chamisa's sabbatical? Taken over who? The Chamisa Chete Chete Brigade? To what end and purpose? Because if they are going to be blind and follow blindly, whoever was going to come in and was going to lead them by the nose, like a bull at a market, what difference does it make? Am I surprised that it's Chamisa? No, I'm not. These people are used to personality cult mentality. Who the person leading them by the nose happens to be is irrelevant. Soon after independence, Mugabe was just as popular, if not even more popular, than Chamisa. Even at the time of the Kokurawundi massacre, when anyone with any eyes at all could see that this was a crime against humanity, some of the hardcore Zanu PF supporters closed their eyes, closed their minds. They refused to see what their eyes would show them, what they could see with their own eyes. They refused to register that in their minds. It took nearly 20 years for many people to finally accept that Mugabe was a murderous tyrant, corrupt, incompetent, who was dragging the nation deeper and deeper into the abyss. When Tsvangirai emerged, up to this day, some people will swear Tsvangirai was an iconic democratic leader. But ask them, what is it he achieved during his time as leader of MDC? They can't name even one thing, because he achieved nothing. He was the leader of the party during the GNU that failed to implement even one token reform. Chamisa took over. And the same blind allegiance to Chamisa is what we are witnessing right now. Some notable medias like Change Radio have been championing, calling Chamisa change champion in chief. But you ask them again and again, name one change that he has accomplished ever since he took over from Tsvangirai in 2018. They can't name it because there's none. Zimbabwe is facing a serious political crisis. The number one thing we must avoid as a nation is going into the 2028 elections, participate in those flawed elections with no reforms implemented, because we believed another idiotic lie that the opposition would win rigged elections. And then at the end of the day, gives Zanu PF legitimacy. And thus continue the tragic human suffering that we're seeing. No, I'm not surprised that Chamisa returned from his sabbatical, popular as ever. There is no greater idiot than one who denies what he can see with his own eyes. And what makes the whole situation in Zimbabwe so tragic is that we are not talking of one idiot. We are talking of millions of idiots. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.